It is getting dark, it's getting cold, it's getting scary, and the sun's going down and you're alone. And what's the next step you gotta do? You gotta get a shelter because you don't want to be exposed to the elements. And in this video, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We are going to be building a simple shelter using 2 ingredients, and then we are going to be talking about the importance of a shelter in both the physical and the spiritual sense. And I'm also going to be making a fire. Okay, montage. Honestly, that's really good enough. Oh, and also, I don't know if that showed, but that's lichen. And believe it or not, some of it is edible. Not all of it though, but it can be poisonous. It's like a symbiotic relationship. I've already given myself a boo-boo. On to phase 2, and that's gonna go really quick. You know what? That's what this is for. Don't judge me! I'm not that good with fire yet. Ah. Phase 2. Now, this is my paracord. It really does not need to be this beefy, but for some reason I'm extra. Now, what I'm doing is I'm creating a ridge line. A ridge line is a thingy that goes across. That's a ridge line. So now, what I'm going to be doing is, so there are different ways to do different knots, but because knots are incredibly boring, but also probably life-saving, I'm only going to be doing double square knot, which is the knot that you use before you tie your shoe. Like, you know, that simple, just over, under, tighten, that times 2. So what that looks like, oh my goodness, it's got a loopy. Huh. Okay, so I'm not gonna do that for one side. So for one side, loopy. Oh no. Okay, maybe I won't do the loopy. I think the loopy might take an extra. That still might take up a lot. What the? How did this even happen? That's even worse than before. Oh, okay, it'll work for this one. We're changing our tactic. Problem solved. Who said we weren't problem solvers? Loopy, tighten. So I've learned this from Chris Spear, Primitive Camping and Bushcraft, which is a podcast, and he said to make it chest level. So, you know, I'm like, I may or may not be, you know, a little on the average side. I like to believe I'm 5'10", but people tell me otherwise. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna not listen to the haters. Oh. That's not supposed to look like that. In, out, tighten. We're gonna redo that. So I'm gonna leave it a little loose because I'm gonna toggle it. So I'm probably gonna need a lot. No! It doesn't fit in! I can't fit it in! It's okay. We're gonna do something about that. What the original plan was doing like a little bunny ear and then pushing it through. But it doesn't fit! So I'm just... And then once you would push it through, I would stick a stick in it and then twist it, and then that's how I would toggle it. I think that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna kind of weave it under, then weave it. And then you have a lovely hopefully, let me show you the knot I'm doing. It's literally a double square knot. So down, in, out, tighten. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to stake the corners, those two corners, into the ground. And thankfully the ground is actually pretty wet because we just got a mini monsoon like a couple days ago. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna stake it into the ground. I should have gone over on both sides because now it's kind of crusty looking and it's kind of droopy. Isn't that so much better? Let me get back. Let me turn on my fire. They say you shouldn't put leaves on a fire when you're like trying to get a kindling or whatever. So you don't have to put leaves, but I sometimes do. What I also use is dry pine needles. That's super flammable. I wonder how the first people who ever made fire, I wonder how that happened. It was probably lightning that hit the ground. They were like, oh. No, because in the Garden of Eden, it said the angel had a sword, like a flaming sword. I wonder if Adam and Eve ever saw like fire before and they were like, oh. No, it's not funny because that's when man fell. I'm also going to put leaves on it because try and stop me. So obviously the lean-to does not offer the best protection. But we're just going to ignore that for a second, and we're just going to gaze upon the fact that one half of you will be protected from the elements. Thank me later. You know what? Just like, I feel so protected in here, right? Like, I don't have to lean down at all because this thing won't hit me otherwise. It's a shelter, okay? It's a shelter. Leave me alone. The point is, look, it's quick, it's simple, and if a sudden rainstorm appeared and you scoot far enough back in there, it'll protect you from like 65% of the wetness. So it's really mostly beneficial for like a wood cache, because like if you have a more superior shelter, then the only thing that's good for is keeping your wood dry in case it does rain. It's actually pretty hot out here. Beginning to rethink why I did a fire. But you know, it's good. It's good practice. Even though, you know, I didn't start it, it's still good. Okay. Anyway, so on to the really important stuff. I have my notes right here. But I really want to dive in the sheer importance of refuge and really just seeing how God is a refuge. And I know that's a cliche, or I know it at least sounds like a cliche, like, yeah, you know, all Christians know that God is supposed to be their refuge, but what does that mean and what does that look like? I think it's really easy to just kind of be told, like, God is your refuge and stuff, like, you know, he's your foundation. And when you've tasted and seen the Lord and seen that he is good, it's so easy to say that because you understand it. You've lived through that. You know what it's like when people say God is a refuge. Like, yes, he is my refuge. But for those that are really trying to grow and seek Christ and really just know the intricacies of the beauty of a relationship with the Lord, sometimes that's not really an easy answer. So I feel like God has really been showing me a lot of things about himself, especially through nature and being outside. And I've even been reading the book Back to Eden, and it's basically just a book that centers on turning back to nature for literal physical healing. Dude, there's a spider trying to crawl in. What are you doing, bro? Okay, he turned around. Anyways, so yeah. So what does that look like? God being a refuge in a world that's pretty much a jungle. The most prominent verses that I want to kind of touch in right now are Psalm 139 verses 7 through 12. So the biggest thing is like through the fact that like even if I'm in darkness, you're there with me. There's literally no escaping him. And I feel like sometimes whenever we find ourselves in these pits of sinning, or when we find ourselves not really being where we want to be in life, when we don't feel like ourselves in our body, then I feel like we tend to just kind of like subconsciously or even like purposefully push God away. And it may not even be out of spite, but it may just be out of like shame or guilt, or just feeling of needing to be isolated to get things figured out, when the reality, and then through that, we feel, when we need God, we feel like he's so far away because we pushed him, or because we just ignored him, or just become complacent and done our own thing, and God let us do that. But what's so incredible is that even through that, God is literally right there. So when we feel the furthest away from him, it's like that's when God is the nearest. I hear people tell me so often, like, I've even complained to God about this too. It's like, I don't feel you, God. I don't see you. Where are you? The Bible doesn't speak to me. Church doesn't reach me. Worship service, nothing's reaching me. It's like God is still so present through that. And that is just one of the most beautiful things ever. Like, God cannot be boxed in. And like, the enemy works at keeping us in this prison, or keeping us in our own box of just shame and guilt and fear. And that restricts us from living the full lives that God has called us to be. God also is a refuge to protect us from ourselves. His commands and his principles keep us from destroying ourselves. So within your shelter, you have refuge, which is your security, and it's like purpose. So because God is our security, that means he's also our purpose, because he gives us a reason to exist. We find meaning when we feel like we have a purpose. So like when we're doing a job we find meaningful, then the job actually becomes enjoyable. So we find incredible security and incredible refuge when we center our focus, obedience, trust, and faith on God. So yeah, I'm hoping that you guys liked the video, and even though I didn't make a decent shelter, it was still a shelter nonetheless. So I'm hoping that you enjoy this whole kind of like bushcraft survival diaries kind of thing. Really just hoping that you guys have learned something new, and or have just been reminded of something, and being able to appreciate the goodness of God. So have a good day, do something nice for each other, and God bless you. Adios.